Every time you turn on a tap in the second largest metropolis in the United States, crystal clear water flows out as if by magic. Yet this everyday convenience hides a ruthless history of survival, manipulation, and immense geographical theft. The entire modern landscape of Southern California exists because of William Mulholland, a self-taught engineer who secretly decided which cities would get water and which would turn to dust. How did an Irish immigrant with absolutely zero formal academic training manage to seize absolute control over a region's most precious resource? The answer requires unearthing a story of brilliant calculation and political deception that completely reshaped the American West. To understand the power dynamics flowing through modern municipal plumbing, we have to travel back to an era when water was pulled from the dirt by hand. In the year 1877, Los Angeles was barely a city at all. It was a dusty, agricultural town of only about 9,000 residents, relying entirely on the unpredictable flow of the Los Angeles River. The entire municipal water system consisted of a central, open earthen trench known as the Mother Ditch, which fed a haphazard network of hollowed-out wooden logs. That same year, a 22-year-old sailor named William Mulholland arrived in the sleepy California town after a long journey from Ireland. He had precisely $15 to his name and absolutely no formal education in hydrology, geology, or civil engineering. Desperate for steady work, he took a menial job as a ditch tender for the private Los Angeles City Water Company. His daily routine involved clearing weeds, removing heavy debris, and manually repairing the leaky wooden pipes that spiderwebbed across the growing town. But Mulholland possessed an obsessive curiosity and a brilliant, highly absorbent mind that refused to stagnate in a ditch. He spent his evenings poring over borrowed textbooks on mathematics, geometry, and civil engineering by the dim flicker of a kerosene lamp. As he walked the riverbed daily, he physically mapped the underlying geological formations of the entire basin in his head. The private water company's payroll ledgers soon reflected his rapid promotion from a simple ditch digger to the superintendent of the entire network by the year 1886. He knew every drop of water, every pipe, and every subterranean pressure point in the system better than the wealthy men who owned it. During this period, Mulholland began meticulously recording water flow rates and population growth statistics in his personal engineering diaries. These handwritten entries revealed a terrifying mathematical certainty that the city leaders had chosen to completely ignore. Los Angeles was expanding at a pace that its natural, localized water supply could not possibly sustain for much longer. By the dawn of the 20th century, the population of Los Angeles had exploded to over 100,000 people. The private water company, driven entirely by short-term profit margins, outright refused to invest capital into expanding the aging infrastructure. Faucets ran dry in the sweltering summer heat, and an angry public demanded that the city take immediate control of its own survival. In the year 1902, the city government officially purchased the private water franchise, establishing a public municipal utility. Mulholland was immediately appointed as the chief engineer of the newly formed Los Angeles Bureau of Waterworks and Supply. He now held unprecedented, almost dictatorial bureaucratic power over the literal lifeblood of a rapidly expanding American city. By the year 1904, a devastating drought that had plagued the region for over a decade finally pushed the water supply to its absolute breaking point. The Los Angeles River, the sole artery keeping the city alive, was dangerously close to running completely dry. Mulholland realized that without a massive new injection of liquid resources, the city would inevitably collapse back into the desert. He began conducting highly secretive expeditions, studying topographical maps and surveying distant mountain ranges for a permanent solution. The survival of Los Angeles now depended entirely on finding a massive river to steal, and Mulholland had his eyes fixed on a distant, fertile basin. The stage was set for one of the most audacious and controversial resource grabs in American history. Mulholland's gaze landed on the Owens Valley, a lush agricultural haven located 250 miles north of Los Angeles. The valley was fed by the snowmelt of the eastern Sierra Nevada mountains, boasting a massive river that emptied into a terminal lake. He calculated that this distant river could easily sustain a city of over 2 million people. To secure the water rights without triggering a massive price spike or local resistance, Mulholland needed a proxy. He partnered with Fred Eaton, a former mayor of Los Angeles, who already had established relationships with the Owens Valley farmers. Eaton traveled through the valley in the summer of 1905, presenting himself as a private rancher looking to invest in local agriculture. The mechanism of their geographical theft was hidden in the fine print of standard land purchasing contracts. Eaton bought up hundreds of miles of crucial riverfront property, quietly transferring the attached riparian water rights to the city of Los Angeles. The official county property ledgers recorded these transactions as private sales, completely concealing the city's involvement until it was too late. When the truth finally broke in the local newspapers late in 1905, the farmers realized they had been legally stripped of their future. The federal government, championed by President Theodore Roosevelt, actually sided with Mulholland. Roosevelt declared that the water was more valuable, serving the greater good of a growing metropolis, than a scattered farming community. Back in Los Angeles, Mulholland needed a staggering amount of money to build the infrastructure required to move an entire river. In the year 1907, he campaigned relentlessly for a $23 million municipal bond issue. He presented detailed architectural blueprints to the public, promising an era of unlimited growth and prosperity if they funded his vision. Construction on the Los Angeles Aqueduct officially began in 1908, cementing Mulholland's status as a modern engineering titan. He commanded a grueling workforce of over 5,000 men, carving through unforgiving deserts and blasting through solid granite mountains. The logistical supply manifests from the project detail the use of massive steam tractors and specially built rail lines just to transport the concrete. After 5 brutal years, the massive concrete artery was finally completed in the year 1913. On opening day, tens of thousands of residents gathered at the San Fernando Valley Cascade to watch the first wave of mountain water arrive. Mulholland stood before the roaring flood and delivered a legendary 5-word dedication speech. There it is. Take it. The arrival of the Owens River instantly transformed Los Angeles from a vulnerable desert town into an unstoppable real estate empire. The dry, dusty San Fernando Valley suddenly blossomed with lucrative citrus groves and massive housing subdivisions. Wealthy syndicates who had been secretly tipped off about the aqueduct's terminus made absolute fortunes overnight. While Los Angeles thrived, the Owens Valley began to wither under the relentless siphoning of its lifeblood throughout the early 1920s. The once thriving agricultural hub slowly reverted to a barren, alkaline dust bowl as the lakebed completely dried up. Local farmers watched their orchards die and their generational wealth evaporate into the scorching wind. Desperation finally ignited into violent resistance in the year 1924. A group of heavily armed Owens Valley residents seized a key control gate on the aqueduct, opening the valves and dumping the precious water out onto the dry valley floor. Local law enforcement explicitly refused to arrest the saboteurs, viewing them as local heroes fighting against an oppressive urban empire. The sabotage escalated rapidly, culminating in multiple coordinated dynamite attacks against the aqueduct pipeline by 1927. Mulholland responded with furious, uncompromising force, dispatching heavily armed city guards with orders to shoot to kill any trespassers. The conflict essentially became a localized civil war, waged over a concrete trench in the middle of the Mojave Desert. Before the disaster, the city's population continued to explode throughout the 1920s, outstripping even the massive Owens River supply. To capture every possible drop of winter runoff, Mulholland ordered the construction of multiple massive storage reservoirs around the city limits. The largest and most critical of these was placed in San Francisco Canyon, holding the emergency reserves for an increasingly thirsty population. By the spring of 1928, Mulholland had reached the absolute zenith of his political and engineering power. He had just completed the massive St. Francis Dam, a soaring concrete monolith built to store a year's supply of emergency water for Los Angeles. The reservoir behind it held over 12 billion gallons of water, suspended directly above the sleeping towns of the Santa Clara River Valley. On the morning of March 12, 1928, the dam keeper noticed muddy water leaking from the concrete abutments. Panicked by the potential implications, he immediately summoned Mulholland to perform an emergency physical inspection of the site. Mulholland arrived, examined the seepage, and confidently declared the massive structure completely safe for continued operation. Just hours later, at 2 minutes before midnight, the St. Francis Dam catastrophically failed. The underlying bedrock, built upon an ancient, undetected landslide, completely gave way under the immense hydrostatic pressure. A terrifying wall of water, towering over 100 feet high, roared down the dark canyon with the force of a continuous earthquake. The official investigative reports later revealed the fatal flaw in Mulholland's unchecked authority. Because he was completely self-taught and operated without any independent bureaucratic oversight, no external geologist had ever verified the stability of the foundation site. The engineering blueprints were approved solely on his signature, meaning his personal blind spots became structural death traps. The floodwaters scoured the valley floor all the way to the Pacific Ocean, annihilating entire towns and wiping away miles of infrastructure. Over 430 people were killed in the crushing wave of mud, debris, and concrete blocks. It remains the second largest loss of life in a single disaster in California history, surpassed only by the 1906 earthquake. Following the collapse, the city of Los Angeles quietly mobilized immense financial resources to avoid a massive class action lawsuit. The municipal government paid out millions of dollars in rapid settlements to the survivors and the families of the victims. These swift financial payouts were specifically designed to keep the city's broader water acquisition strategies completely out of the federal courts. The disaster instantly shattered Mulholland's reputation as the infallible hero of Los Angeles. During the subsequent coroner's inquest, the broken engineer took the witness stand and accepted full responsibility for the catastrophic failure. He famously wept before the jury, stating softly that he envied the dead and wished he had perished in the flood himself. He resigned from the Water Bureau in absolute disgrace just months later, retreating into a life of deep isolation. The man who had single-handedly built the modern infrastructure of a sprawling empire spent his final years haunted by the lives his creation had taken. He died in 1935, leaving behind a wildly complicated legacy carved into the physical geography of the state. Despite the tragedy, the institutional machinery that Mulholland built continued to ruthlessly extract resources from the surrounding regions. The environmental devastation in the Owens Valley eventually created one of the worst sources of particulate air pollution in the entire nation. The dry, alkaline lake bed generated massive toxic dust storms that choked the remaining residents for decades. It was not until the late 1990s that strict federal court orders finally forced Los Angeles to begin mitigating the ecological disaster they had engineered. Yet the farmers who originally lost their ancestral lands received only pennies on the dollar, completely defeated by the legal might of the city. The agricultural economy of the valley was permanently sacrificed to feed the booming southern metropolis. Conversely, Los Angeles leveraged its stolen water to become an unstoppable global economic powerhouse. The real estate syndicates that originally backed the aqueduct multiplied their fortunes, establishing the sprawling, decentralized urban layout that defines Southern California today. The massive concrete artery still delivers hundreds of millions of gallons of mountain snowmelt to urban faucets every single day. The catastrophic collapse of the St. Francis Dam also fundamentally changed how the nation approaches massive infrastructure projects. The disaster directly prompted the creation of strict, independent state oversight panels for all future dam construction. Never again would a single self-taught engineer be allowed to approve the geological foundations of a structure holding back billions of gallons of water. The story of William Mulholland is the ultimate testament to the terrifying power of unchecked institutional authority. He proved that the true architects of modern society are rarely the politicians standing at the podiums, but rather the quiet bureaucrats controlling the vital resources. His brilliance built a shimmering oasis, but his hubris permanently scarred the landscape. When examining the sheer scale of the metropolis he made possible, we have to weigh the monumental progress against the ruthless extraction it required. Do you consider Mulholland a necessary visionary who boldly secured the survival of millions, or an unchecked resource baron whose deceptions ultimately ruined countless lives? Subscribe to our channel to continue uncovering the hidden historical forces, secret negotiations, and invisible architectures that shape the systems we live under today.